Do this show with, and I think it's a show that I'm most excited about. Is one article down memory lane that brought back so much to me, talking about how we pay now $80 for sneakers, and we used to get it for 98 cents back in those days. Let's talk a little bit about you, Vin. Where were you born, and what schools you went to?
Well, I was born here in Tuckahoe. First, let me tell you, back, I'm 83, so back in those days, you never said Eastchester, because Eastchester had no post office. It was always Tuckahoe. So that, I remember World War II, where you're from, Tuckahoe, where I happened to live in Eastchester, and anything I had to say, it was always Tuckahoe. So that Tuckahoe had the lasting name. And if you ask me where I live, I still say Tuckahoe.
I think everything up to probably Lake Isle had a Tuckahoe address in those days.
That's right. There was no Eastchester post office.
And some of the Tuckahoe quarries that we talk about really were in Eastchester.
Yes, they lay along the vein all the way up to Scarsdale. But I went through the schools here, and I always like to say I was captain of the baseball, basketball, and football team. That was a little something.
You were quite an athlete then. And yet we know you most for your efforts in tennis.
Yeah, well, it's a funny thing. I took to tennis, and I took to golf. I was the tennis coach for the Davis Cup team for 20 years out in Forest Hills.
Oh, great.
And I have a background in tennis and golf. I was the golf pro at West Point. I taught at West Point, you know, for a while there, and I was the golf pro. So those were two late added-on sports.
Now, Eastchester High School, of course, wasn't built till 28. What school did you go to here in Tuckahoe?
There was a Waverly High School, Waverly Grammar School, and it was right by Bellew Avenue on Main Street, the name after my folks. And because I guess my folks are one of the oldest families in the town. As I say, I was born 83 years ago. My father was born, and his father was born, all in Waverly up there, and so that we're natives. But the Waverly School was a central school, and it took all the boys from Tuckahoe too, you know, and Eastchester, and then they had an elementary school there, and so that it was a central school for everything. Then, of course, the town expanded, and with it had to expand school.
Now, some of the teachers there that I recall, of course, we mentioned earlier Miss McNell, and you said she's still alive in her 90s, and Miss Fisher, and Miss Toronto, and, I guess a whole host of others there.
Yeah.
Mr. John?
Yes. Well, everyone you mentioned is a favorite. Of course, you remember the principal was E.J. Merchant.
Oh, I couldn't know a finer person. I know once when I was playing by the school, I'd broken an arm, and he took me to the clinic at Lawrence Hospital to see that I got repaired and put into a cast.
Yes.
Just a nice person.
Yes. Well, one of my pupils that grew up very successfully is the mayor of Tuckahoe today.
Oh, I don't know how successful, but I enjoy it. Some of the other things in your article, it brings back memories. Whatever happened to sardines? We used to live by them, and how true that was.
My father had a grocery store, a country grocery store, and let me tell you, it was country. The pickle barrel, the cracker barrel, and all that. And so that I was brought up horse and wagon, no automobiles, horse and wagon delivering groceries. So that in our grocery store there were big cellars, and every customer come in says, "Give me 6 cans of sardines," and of course sardines was only 10 cents a can. So that's what the reference is there.
Yeah, a couple of other things caught my eye too. Eskimo pie.
Oh yes, that's in your time, isn't it?
Yeah, it was in my time. I guess they're starting to revive it now. But another item, as you know, I used to teach with AT&T, and we used to separate the generations by asking them, who knows what a Charlotte russe is?
I've eaten many a Charlotte russe. Many of them were sold in the country grocery store.
Right, and you don't see those anymore.
No, that's so much. I'll point to one thing. You need a biscuit.
Right.
When you were a boy, your mother had 6 boxes of Unita biscuits from my father's store. They were 5 cents. You are right. You remember nickel a box. They're $1.69 today. Wow. I stopped eating Unita biscuits.
The Jazz Bowl, of course.
Oh, yeah.
That was an interesting thing. Everyone
I
had
think
their...
Harry Truman was the last fellow I saw in the
Right.
Jazz Bowl. But in my dapper days, as we call it, I always liked Jazz Bowl.
Yeah. Another item, of course, the trolley car.
Oh, yes. There were, mind you, the first automobile I remember in town was Dr. Austin. He had an automobile, and the only one, and everything else, of course, was trolley car. And the main switch was on Waverly Square, which jotted off to Yonkers, to Mount Vernon, to Nerd Shelter, White Plains, to all centers. So that was the hubbub there.
Yeah, I read a book once, I think it was called The Great Mouthpiece. Was it Fallon?
Fallon.
Yeah, and he talked about how you could get onto the trolley car and get transfer after transfer and go all the way from Westchester up to Boston for a nickel.
To tell you the truth, as kids, for fun, we had a nickel once in a while, and we jumped on the trolley car and did that same trip just for joyride.
Another item here, the Hotel Grambling.
Oh, yes. That's a landmark, historians. It started off with Mr. Lawrence making a place for, he built Bronx, Lawrence. So he was building up a place for residents to come in, and they came in, the big people of the world, such as Greta Garbo and others. And it was the social spot for the people of Tuckahoe.
Well, I won't tell you who did it, but in my day, people got up there where the big sign was that said Hotel Grambling, and they took some letters off so it spelled Hot Grandma.
I never heard that.
I wasn't one of them.
That makes good newspaper copy.
Vinegar, how we used to use vinegar for everything, including for sunburns.
Yes. Going back to the country grocery store, I see the shelf lined with vinegar. Now you can't find it in the store. It's not used like it was. But we used to come home from the beach. Because our beach was the Bronx River. Few people realized the Bronx River in our day had bathhouses and everything on it. But when we come home sunburned, Mother would put vinegar on the burn, and I hear today that's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah. Well, now they're pushing, what is it, apple cider vinegar for all sorts of ailments.
Yes.
The games that we used to play, red light, jump rope, leapfrog, ringalivio, and I think we'll add another one. The one was a buck where you used to jump over and try to break the back of the person holding it up.
That was a leapfrog.
And knickers, that certainly brings back an interesting memory. Of course, you weren't considered a grown-up until you got your long pants.
That's right. You just lived the day you'd get your long pants. You didn't get your long pants till you went into high school.
That's right.
I was running around knickers, I think I thought I was 13 and 14.
And the big graduations they used to have at 9th grade.
Oh, yes, yes.
Of course, now that's all gone. The only graduation they recognize is from senior high school.
Senior high.
Corduroy pants.
Yeah, every boy had a pair of corduroy pants. Even if they squeaked, you wore them.
And, of course, the old barber shop quartets, they were quite the thing in those days.
Yes.
Vince, where were you when World War II happened in Pearl Harbor?
I was teaching at Eastchester High School. I was the coach and teaching up the physical ed. I was in charge of all the elementary schools. Then war broke out, and I enlisted, and I got in the good old infantry, of course. And but all of a sudden, they needed someone for rehabilitation, it was called. And I was plucked out because I had a degree, and I had gone on to college, and got my phys ed degree. And I was plucked out and sent to England to learn what rehabilitation of the wounded soldier was all about. Then I had a glorious career. My job was to take all the wounded soldiers to camps. I had 4 camps. I had 80 physical ed teachers under me. And what we tried to do was recondition them so that not to go home, but to go back to combat. That wasn't a popular thing.
No.
The guy said, I'm getting better to get shot again.
Yeah.
So I spent my years over there and head of the physical reconditioning departments. And And from there, then they needed, when the war was over, they needed that department in West Point, and I went up and set it up in West Point.
Oh, that's
So it was
great.
a glorious career.
That was, I guess a lot of memories come back, especially this year, the 50th anniversary of D-Day,
Yes.
the liberation of Paris. Did you get into France?
Yeah, well, I was in the invasion, but they were sending us over on everything, and I was sent over on the Isle of Wight. The Isle of Wight is square. It's a ferry boat. And we had terrible trip. And with the other big things going by us and all that. So we were posted lost at sea for 2 weeks. But here I am. We got out of it. So that was a horrible thing.
Yeah.
I was not in the actual combat, but I was in the large size invasion.
Pretty soon will come up the 50th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge.
Yes, yes. I can remember the Battle of the Bulge. That was a time they needed soldiers, and the soldiers were pulled out of desks and everything, put a gun on the shoulder, and they didn't know what a gun was all about. But they had reinforcements at the Bulge.
And Patton traveled long distance to relieve them.
He sure did. He sure did.
Some of the boys that you knew that didn't come back. Of course, one comes to mind, Spooch Stuyvesant.
Oh, yes. Spooch was my boy. I coached the football team with Jarvis, as you know. And Spooch was a beautiful boy. And he died in a way I can't tell you. It was so bad.
Yeah?
No, I couldn't tell you. And there was Piggy Pizzella,
Great war fighter.
he died, shot out of the Italian skies in a plane. And then Joe LaManna, who you and I both loved. Joe was another one to die in the airplane. There was exactly 98 people died. I'm a little bit of a historian and keep that. 98 people died in the town of Eastchester in World War I. Now that's a lot. And I only wish I could rattle with the 98, but they were all our boys.
I did an interview last week with Ben Spadaro, and we talked about where were you when you heard about Pearl Harbor, and like so many of us, we were here at the Itch, affectionately called the Itch, and he had been there, and Joe Yancey had been there, Johnny Colonna, and so many that I had discussed this with through the years and brought back memories there. After the war, you came back, and you went to West Point?
Yes. As I said before, they needed this department, and I headed it in Europe, and so they pulled me out. As soon as the war was over, they pulled me out of Europe and sent me right up to West Point, where I said I would stay as long as, till I got out of the service. I did not want to stay in the Army. I wanted to go back to Tuckahoe. And so I did stay up there and set up the reconditioning department. And that, of course, is West Point's an establishment, 4,000 or 5,000 troops. And they had wounded from injuries. So this department had to set them up to physically recondition them back into good shape to get back in line. So I set that up, and then I got out of there and come back to Eastchester, but not as a coach. In the meantime, Bill Horan, Honorable Bill Horan, who we all loved,
went up to the legislature,
got a hold of me at West Point. He says, we want to start a recreation department. And, well, I said, I'm coming back to teach. So they convinced me to start the recreation department. I said I'd stay 5 years, but I stayed 50.
You forgot the zero at the end.
It's a joke, you know. They call me the 50-year man. I'm 50 years. I was with the recreation department. I was 15 years with the, you know, as chairman of the People's Westchester Bank, 50 years, and at the Tuckahoe Bank. And then I was 50 years as a newspaper editor, so they called me the 50-year man.
And the old bank financed a lot of construction here.
You hit a good point. I'm glad you brought that out. That Tuckahoe building and loan, we used to call it, which is now First Fidelity. It's gone through a lot of growing up. But when it was Judge Ben Riley ran it, and as I say, I was 50 years with it. Let me tell you, just about every house in Tuckahoe
Yeah.
had a Tuckahoe building and loan mortgage.
I was looking at my old deed for the former home on Stewart Place, and a lot of that land was owned by the railroad,
Yes,
and then subdivided off and sold off.
yes, yes, yes,
And most of the, I guess the heavy development came in the late 20s.
yes, yes. What did it, as you know, is Hodgman's. And as we called Hodgman's College, everybody went to work in Hodgman's. If you didn't have work in Hodgman's, you didn't have a degree. And the quarries.
Right.
So they were without homes. And that's when Judge Riley and Mr. Dusenberry, and I was 50 years with them myself, stepped in, and we absolutely turned down nobody. Nobody. And so the houses sprouted up all over.
Right. Let's talk about some of the old names in Tuckahoe. Of course, you mentioned Doc Austin, and behind the cameras is Dewey Masante. His brother was a doctor, delivered me.
Oh, yes.
And, of course, Doc Weston.
Yes. The Dr. Smith, and Dr. Merrill, and Dr. Stevenson, and there was quite a few. That's the old school, and of course now it's...
In those days, most of the children were delivered at home rather than go to the hospital.
That's right, that's right. And but those are doctors that must be in the legend and history of our town, because particularly Dr. Austin.
Oh, he was well known. He was a very proper man.
He was on my board, and I was chairman of the board, and he used to say, "Vincent, let's hurry." He had his cape on and his high hat to catch a train to go to the opera. He was a well-educated, cultured gentleman.
I read that article about him in the paper. I guess it was a couple of years ago. Very, very interesting. How about some of the old names in Tuckahoe? Of course, the Longabardis.
You date people about the Longabardis. As you know, and most people know, the Longabardis restaurant, everybody went to that. In fact, the actors and actresses and...
Jack Barr, I understand, was a regular.
Oh, yeah. You have no idea. And they were legends. There was Jake's, it was called by a lot of people. And, but everybody went to Longabardis. It was fantastic. And the Longabardis had a sister there. She was known the world over, you know, and making Italian food, and everybody would ask for her to get the Italian food. You know? Can
you recall some of the notables that went to Jake?
What's her name? The Italian actress, well, she's on still very popular.
Was Eleanor Powell one of those?
Powell was there.
She lived up at Colonial Heights.
Yes, and there's another girl, actress, that made the route. Evening Crestwood, she was there. And they brought celebs there. It was a melting pot. You know, they had the longest bar in the world and the narrowest bar in the world.
A nice big back room.
Big back room. But the politicians, that's where they held their meetings. And anytime you were honoring somebody, it was in cakes.
Always cakes.
There was another one was the Wilmot Inn up there. That was a popular place. And that was county popular.
Another one, Fisher's Tavern.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Of course, that wouldn't be an outing. You'd go out there and sit under the grape arbors and drink your beer and have the kids playing whatever they were playing on.
Yes, it was a noted place for good restaurants. In those days, if you don't mind me saying, saloons.
And most of them, I guess, used to take bets on the side.
Oh, yeah. I didn't want to bring that up. I'll let the mayor say that.
But it's true. Dutch Schultz.
That's interesting. You know, I actually remember him well. I remember him getting off the train, fine gentleman, dressed beautifully, And he'd go up as far as Charlie Reed's. Charlie Reed had a bar and grill. And he'd always get a beer in Charlie Reed's, then go out and go up to his mansion that he lived on in Gifford Park, there, right on Mill Road, right up by Concordia. And he lived there.
Oh,
lived there.
Winter Hill Road, wasn't it?
What did I say?
No.
Oh, yeah, I got my sister. Yes, where Winter Hill turns right. The post road, there's a big home still there.
Yeah,
it's owned by Concordia now.
It's the dormitory.
Dormitory, and that was where he lived. And for the longest time, and no one dreamed it was that chauffeur. It was Flagenheimer or something like that, his name was.
Now, there was rumors that he owned the old Parkway Casino.
You know what?
Parkway Casino building?
He could have, but I don't know about that. I know that was a very popular place.
Yeah.
I know because the fact President Roosevelt always was in there on his coming up in the car to his home. He always stopped there. And I was in there one day. He pulled in, and boy, I'm telling you, it was quite a bit of excitement.
He was a very interesting character. Of course, all the news pictures and whatnot, you never knew he was crippled.
Oh,
and they always showed pictures of him either sitting or standing. But it was only years after that.
They did that on purpose.
Yeah.
Well, they say you're not judged till 50 years after your dates, and you have Social Security and all that stuff. He certainly made a mark on our society for the good.
There's also a rumor that he declared for the governorship there at the Parkway Casino. I don't know whether it's true or not, but that's the story that's going on.
I don't know that, but I saw it. He was at the Parkway Casino because I saw him there.
It was known by a number of names. I guess the Parkway Casino
went downhill.
Yeah, Murray's on the.
Murray was he was a key operator. He was Roosevelt's buddy.
I see.
Murray was.
That's probably the reason why Roosevelt stepped there. All righty. Camano, of course, had the print shop here in town.
Oh, yes.
He was a wealth of information.
Oh, he was Peter.
Yeah.
Peter was in everything. Fire department, social departments, whatever you have. Any meeting was called, Peter was there.
Yeah.
And of course, he was one of the owners of the early newspapers, side of his printing shop, which is the Eastchester Record, which I'm identified with. And he was a great fellow.
Oh, he really was. And Patty May.
Patty's a legend to we old people. In the old days, Parkway Oval, that's in Tuckahoe, which people know as Parkway Oval, a beautiful, beautiful park and field down at the end of Lake Avenue, was a center of baseball. When I'm talking about baseball, I'm talking about Tony Lazzari and everybody playing there. And he footed the bill and did everything. He was the greatest guy. And I can remember when we were kids, baseball teams, there was no recreation department then. He would form, he'd come up and he'd say, Vinny, you form the team from Eastchester, and I'll get that Vinny Laporta form the team from Tuckahoe, and we'll have a World Series with the kids. And we'd go over there on Parkway Oval and play.
Now, Lazzari played with the Yankees?
Yeah, Tony. Oh, everybody. He had Iron Man McCluskey. He had everybody. Every time they had time off, he got them. And he'd only give them a $50 bill. That's what they'd get in those days, which was an awful lot of money. But that was a sports arena in Parkway Oval. As you know, the first professional fight in America, the World's Championship, was fought on the Parkway Oval between Pedler Palmer and Terry McGovern. Pedler Palmer was a champion of in England, and Terry McGovern was the Irish terrier, and because the Irishman knocked him out in the first round.
That was almost 100 years ago, in the late
1899.
1899.
Those things are imprinted. Yeah. And there were 9,000 at it. That's a big crowd.
Wow.
And there was everybody from Sir Henry Tittle, the Tetleys, Lipton, the T-Man. He brought his entourage from England, which was a galaxy of stars. And all Broadway. See, Sam Harris was the guy who was the promoter of the fight. Sam Harris was Broadway. So he picked, it was a Westchester boxing club on the Parkway Oval, had bouts there every month. And he picked that. And every carpenter in Tuckahoe got a job for about a month.
Building the rings and all.
All the seats,
Yeah.
9,000 there.
Wow. Where did they ever put them all?
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, back in the days, early days of the 30s, 40s, or 70s, fireworks display down there.
Oh, yes. Tuckahoe's come. You got to give him credit for that.
Yeah.
It was very successful, and thousands and thousands of people come from all over the county to see it. Until one 4th of July, one went up and it came down. And it struck a child in the eye. And Lloyd's of London was an insurer, but the next time they made the insurance rate prohibitive, so it died.
Yeah, it's a pity. Let's talk about old Columbus Avenue. You mentioned Jake's. What other stores do you recall there?
Columbus Avenue was called Breckinridge Street after the great general in the Civil War. And Breckinridge, mind you, there was no recreation commission. A long, long time ago, the Knights of Columbus ran schoolboy races. And they closed down the village and went down Breckinridge Street to the race. And you went off the long distance running was from Tuckahoe Station to Prestwich Station. And I ran down that street many, many a time. We had relay races. You'd have the fella start at Tuckahoe, another fella maybe by Circuit, another fella down by Charlie Puglisi's coal station, and the anchor man go into the station.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, Charlie Puglisi was quite a legend in this time, too.
Charlie and Pettori and
Joe Pettori.
Yeah, they were legends on the avenue. Lucchese.
Yeah, the Tuckahoe.
Casey, I think you pronounce it.
The Tuckahoe Company.
Yes, yeah.
Alberta's Bakery.
Oh, I remember Alberta's Bakery, and then the chicken place there.
Who ran the chicken? What is
Spatterford.
Spatterford, yeah.
See, in the old days, there were no meat markets with big Frigidaires or wraps. You went to Spatterford and got the head of the chicken chopped off and carried it home.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of the Radio Man.
Oh, yes. I know he's a policeman.
Yeah.
He was very, very popular and was this mouthpiece with his horns all over the town.
And London's...
Bart, carpet shop.
And Putterman's Pearl's Furniture Store.
Sam was a member of the Tuckahoe Building and Loan, and a good one. Yeah, that was very active. Then the glass company.
Tuckahoe Paint Glass.
Yes.
Howard's Place.
Yeah.
How about along Main Street? What were some of the stores along there?
In Main Street, of course, the glorious spot, let's face it, it was magnificent, was the Village Hall. Stayed right across from the railroad station with its big pillars, its architecture. It was a wonder of our town. We thought that was magnificent. It was the heartbeat of the town. There was no town hall. There was no town government. The town government was on the second floor of the Village Hall, next to the village government.
Right.
So that the government of the town was running that. Downstairs was the library. And downstairs was the bank. And then later the police station. That was the throb of the community. So that if you lived in Eastchester, if you had any business with town hall or anything, you had to grab the trolley car and come down. So everything, that was the hub. Everything came into them. And
people don't realize only in recent years that the town government and village government separated after World War II.
Absolutely. This is why I premised before. I said, where do you live, Tuckahoe? You never, Eastchester. When I was a boy going to high school, it was Eastchester High School, but it was Tuckahoe.
Mostly farmland up there. Of course, it was the late 30s that Interlaken was built. That was all apple orchard.
Sure.
And after World War II, Huntley.
Yes, it was farmland, produced land from Scarsdale all the way down, then Continental California Road was a dirt road. And that was filled with cattle all the time. And I had a hard time getting my horse and wagon through that cattle. went all the way down to Mount Vernon.
Well, you've seen some tremendous changes coming from really what was the horse and wagon days right up to the jet age and the information age, computer age, you name it.
Yes, indeed.
It's really an amazing era of progress.
I count my blessings,
Yeah, yeah,
and they are many.
yeah.
I love the village of Tuckahoe so much. I really do. I lived all my life in Tuckahoe. Especially when I was a kid, I went to the Itch. That was the one theater.
Yeah, Mr. Linhart was a great fellow.
Yeah.
I was told to ask you about Bork Cochran.
Oh, don't get me wound up on that. You've heard of forgotten heroes and everything. I tried to get to our local historical association with Bork Cochran, and they don't know him. Let me just give you a thumbnail. He was a teacher in Waverly School, and he was studying law, and he was from Ireland, and he was a young man, and he happened to marry a relation of mine, Williamson, and he was brilliant, and he opened his shop down in New York, still teaching at Waverly, and he grew up to be a quick, became the head of Tammany Hall. Grow up so big. He was the greatest orator in the country and in Europe as well. He was always in Europe. He was an intimate friend of Churchill's mother. And he brought Churchill to Tuckahoe. He had him up at West Point. He had him at his own home at the Bellew home in Waverly Square. And he gave 3 successive speeches for the Democratic nominee for the President of the United States. 3 successive over 12 years. Now, A. Stevenson called him the greatest orator. Churchill called him the greatest orator. And that's one of ours.
One of our local boys.
And I write it, and somebody will meet me on the street and say, I'm getting tired of hearing about Bork Cochran. But he was, I would say, if you're looking for a legend, if you're looking for a #1 man in our community, it had to be Bork Cochran.
Is there a book, a biography on him?
The greatest, there's a book written by that great author. He wrote on MacArthur. He wrote on in his book, he's got a whole paragraph on Bork Cochran. He calls him the greatest orator, Churchill's friend, European speaker, and emulated by Stevenson and great speakers. And but there's never been. But I tried to get to that historical association and say, get his name in there. You know,
They should.
That's history. You know.
Let's talk about some of the athletes that came out of Tuckahoe and Eastchester High. Tuckahoe High.
Tuckahoe High. I have the unique thing of teaching at both Tuckahoe and Eastchester. And having played in Eastchester. And so that at Eastchester, the Smith brothers,
they were great. Elmer and Frank.
And they went down to Miami and ran a while. About 3 or 4 more years later, Billy comes along. And Billy wound up playing for San Diego and all those teams in the league.
My guess is he was probably the best all-around athlete. I had him in Pony League.
Yes. This is cute. I had Worcester schoolboy races, and I brought some kids up. And he went up, and all these guys, let's use the expression, guys were in spikes and in suits and on. He's got long pants and sneakers on. And 100-yard dash. They didn't see him right away.
Well, the whole family was athletically
yes.
inclined. Kenny and Billy and Frank and Elmer and
They were outstanding. The Hefty family's another bunch.
yeah.
There were
Bob
four
Hefty.
of them, and I would say Jim Hefty was with the Redskins. Was as good as anybody. He could pass, he could kick, he could run fast, and he was a powerhouse. He was 200 and something. And then, of course, you go over to Tuckahoe, and then Washie Sereni in Eastchester. Spent a dozen years with Chicago Bears. He just died.
Yeah.
Terrible. And if you come over to Tuckahoe, Carapella, San Francisco, you couldn't beat him.
Carapella, still around.
Yes, and yes, indeed, he's still around. And then there was with the Chicago Bears in Pittsburgh, the black boy. Strand, Eli Strand.
Yeah.
Eli Strand.
Nice boy.
He was fantastic. Joe LaManna was great. Joe LaManna was with NYU, and at that time I knew the coach of NYU, and he says he's just the greatest. Could pass, he could kick.
Yeah.
And such a beautiful boy. He's the boy that was shot down, and killed in the plane.
Bob Ferry.
Oh, Bob was Eastchester.
Yeah, but he was had a store here in Tuckahoe.
Bob Ferry was fantastic. He was fantastic, Bob Ferry.
See, most people don't realize that Eastchester had Tuckahoe residents in it as well as Eastchester, and Tuckahoe schools have Eastchester residents as well as Tuckahoe, and so when you're talking about athletes that came from the village, it's hard to separate the two schools.
You know, well, Bob Ferry, he was a terrific defensive back too. Outside of, he'd run over you. I coached him. He's one of the greatest. And fellows that didn't, Jack Picciarelli, would probably be listening to this program. Jack was an all-round guy.
Yeah, he was a boxer.
Jack went out to Michigan State, and then he became a professional boxer, and he went as far as fighting the light heavyweight champion of the world. And he was a great football player. I played with him and against him, and
You'd rather play with him.
I have something I'll always remember him by. My back. I was quarterback, and I sneaked. He didn't sneak by him. He hit me broadside. He was a great baseball player. He was a great athlete.
Artie Seguso?
Oh yes, Seguso had great talents and everything. You know, he was a minor league baseball player.
Yeah.
He was a great quarterback.
His son was a professional tennis player.
Oh yes, great national. Sure, when I was with coaching the Junior Davis Cup team, I had him. He was a great player.
How about some of the golf notables?
Oh yes.
This is a great golf town with so many golf courses.
This was called by Nan O'Reilly in the Journal. I can remember it, the cradle of American golf. Golf, it was everybody was a caddy. I was a caddy, so I became a golf pro at West Point.
You remember those days, 90 cents for 18 holes and the 50 cents for 9 holes, huh?
I was Willie McFarland. Willie McFarland won the National Open in 1925. I was his caddy, and he couldn't see. He had the big binoculars, and he'd never take the pin out, and I had to stand behind the pin and V my feet. And he shot at that V, you know, and the greatest Iron Man in the game. Greatest Iron Man in the game. So he was the pro at Oak Ridge. Tommy Creevy was on my team. We played at Waverly High School. He was left forward, I was right forward. Played second. I played short. Great athlete he was. He won the PGA in 1928. And Johnny Farrell, who lived in Waverly Square, won the National Open. He beat Bobby Jones. We have 32 golfers became pros. I have the list of them.
Well, when you think of the golf courses we have here, or had here anyway,
Yes.
Siwanoy and Leewood and Brennan Hills, as it was called in those days, Oak Ridge. And I understand, talking about golf, I understand that many years ago, the top of the hill here around Ridge Road was also a golf course, and that's the reason why Fairview Avenue got its name.
Oh, yes. When I was a kid, Fairview Park, that's now Bronxville Manor. That was the town's recreation acreage.
Yeah.
Who owned it, Lord knows. We had a baseball field there. We had a 9-hole golf links there. Not first class.
Yeah.
Tom Creevey's house, the Creevey brothers, who were 5 professionals, their house boarded on it every time. And definitely, that was a melting pot for everybody. In fact, right next to it was the Allendale horse race track. And my family's connected with that. In the yearbook is Judge Bellew and his racehorses at Allendale.
Oh, we have to see some of that.
And there was, that was carriage, you know, in those days. And that whole era was a mecca for sports. Tremendous, absolutely. Baseball, high-class baseball, played a beautiful diamond. Beautiful.
How about tennis? You were known as the tennis man in town.
Yeah, well, I saw one thing which I didn't like. As a superintendent of recreation, you're superintendent of town. And we were strong in baseball, basketball, football. In tennis, we weren't. And I played tennis. And there was 1 or 2 tennis courts. So when I gave AM recreation, oh boy, I ran clinics every morning. I taught thousands and thousands of kids tennis. Till now, we've got the finest tennis set up in the world.
I guess you were responsible for the leeward courts.
Oh yes, I had trouble, but I got them, and of course, the culmination of, I spent 50 years at the culmination was Lake Isle.
Yeah.
Lake Isle gave us everything, the swimming pools. See, that's where we were short. And now it's what a pleasure it is for me to drive down the street and see kids with a bathing suit over their shoulder walking up Post Road to go swimming, or I could cheer.
I know for many years we had a committee going. At least you formed that committee.
Sure. Tony Calavita, Daddy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd have gone nowhere if it wasn't for Tony Calavita. Let's get that.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the political leaders. Now, town for many years was dominated by Republicans, but yet you had a lot of Democrats like Joe Venuti, especially during the Depression, who was very well connected with the Roosevelt family that put a lot of boys to work.
Joe was a hard worker for a lost cause at that time. And
but he had a lot of political influence.
Jack Hoyt was a power with the Democratic Party. The reason he was a power was he was a nice guy. And he, Republicans loved Jack Hoyt. You know, there was no animosity, no that grit against him. He was very powerful. And then, of course, there was always Democrats.
Yeah.
If I want to admit it, my father was a Democrat.
But I recall many stories about the Venutis getting people work during the Depression when it was tough.
Oh, yes.
And then that's, I guess we could talk about hours about the Depression. I know you were much involved in getting people to work too.
Depression was, if you live that, I was a freshman in college, and the Depression hit. Now, where I was going to get the money from was something, because my father had a country grocery store and everybody owed him. He didn't have any money, and the poor grand old man. And so that I myself knocked on the Republican door. Dick Bennett. He was a grand old man.
Right here in Fairview.
Named after him. So I said, can I speak to Mr. Bennett? Of course you can. I said, now let me see. You're hiring people who you should hire. They got families, they got to feed. You're doing one marvelous job. And we're grateful. The whole town's grateful. But let me tell you something. There's young men going to be doctors. They're into schooling. They're going to be lawyers. And one is going to be a superintendent of recreation or the schools. And I was wondering, couldn't you have the vision to see that people who went to college and were going to be professionals that were going to help this town? And I said, I'm telling you, I'm going to live and die in Tuckahoe, and of course I didn't realize that 56 years ago.
So he lived right here on Terrace Place.
Sure.
They have a little street called
And
Bennett
he
Lane.
said in a new policy, had a committee look at people going to college. If they were just going to college, didn't know what they were going to do, and too bad. But if they were in a professional school, that would help us. And he did that.
That was great.
And I went and picked and shoveled all summer. We built Roth Road. I was down an 8-foot ditch with a pick. It helped pay my way through college.
WPA, PWA, CCC.
Anybody knocks WPA doesn't know what they're talking about. That's all. They have to live it to know what it is.
And my dad was allowed to work he was a crane operator. He was allowed to work only 10 days a month, for which he got $90, and he supported the family on it. And I think there was a lot of the word sharing.
WPA was a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
You know, it always gets the blast from the media.
Yeah.
They don't give you the good, you know.
No, it's a
I
welfare
swear
program.
by it. If it wasn't the way things were going, I wrote a couple of columns, you know, that we might think of the WPA.
Yeah, for those young people that seem to be floundering, don't know which way to go, put in CCC camps. They developed most of the park systems in our country.
I agree completely with that.
Well, we've had a wide-ranging discussion here, and my guest this morning has been Vincent Bellew. He's a noted columnist for the Eastchester Record. He's still writing 2 columns a year, one down memory lane, and the other is called Our Town. Many years he's been involved in the town of Eastchester as recreation director, a lover of sports of all kinds, particularly tennis, and prior to that a teacher, one of my teachers, I might say rather, and he always kept us in line. We never got out of the line with him. And it's been my pleasure talking to you, and I know we've been talking, I guess, about 3/4 of an hour. We could go on for hours and hours talking about the old times in Tuckahoe and Eastchester. Ben, I want to thank you for stopping by, and maybe we can do this again in a couple of months.
Thank you, Mayor. Keep doing your good job, and we'll support you.
Thank you.